Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Food and Finance Show, and today we have another great guest on because when people think about restaurants, one of the things that we don't always think in the forefront of our mind is the food and the safety practices. But if you've gone to any restaurant, you hope that they have good food and safety practices. So we brought on a leading expert in this area, so stay tuned for the show.
Welcome to another great episode of the Food and Finance Show, where we talk about two things we know you love: great food and money. So stay tuned because we got a great show coming your way.
So without further ado, let me bring on our guest, Doug Sutton. Welcome to the show, Doug. How are you?
I'm great, Terrell. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, the topic of food safety it's an important one year round. But being in the food and safety month, I thought it would be great to have this discussion to learn a little bit more about the awesome things that your company is doing, and then for people to hear about, just the topic of food safety. So, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, before we jump into that, one of the things that I'm curious about is because, when people think about, hey, what their dream career or their dream job or their dream business is, most people don't think about, hey, you know what? I really want to go in the food safety. Now, we hope that food safety exists because we're the benefactors of it. So I'm curious, how did you find your way into, the field and the industry and the sector of food safety?
Well, Terrell, I will say that there are people out there who do think of food safety as something that's a very noble pursuit. And they usually are people who are very interested in good food. They like to test different establishments. And because they take an interest in the hospitality business, they generally are attracted to not only just good food, but food that is safe. And I found myself following a very similar path. I grew up enjoying better and better food as I got older. And as I started to appreciate what it takes to not only make good food, but make sure it's safe for people, I found myself very interested in getting into a business that did that more broadly for the industry.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. And as I said, I mean, every person who's eaten at any restaurant or consumed any amount of food, like they are extremely grateful that food safety practices exist. So, I mean, it's definitely something that touches us all. So, you know, now tell us a little bit about just kind of as you kind of pursued, this path in the industry of food and safety. What was it like when just navigating your journey from when you entered it to where you are now?
It's been a very interesting set of changes across the industry over the time that I've been involved, but also most recently with all of the crazy changes that have happened as a result of the pandemic. And I think focusing on the second probably is more interesting to this audience. I will say that generally food safety has gotten much better as a practice and a part of food culture and operating culture over the years. But I will say that over the last couple of years, the awareness of the general public about safety in general, health in general, because of the pandemic has certainly raised more awareness and attention to food safety in general. I think you hit on it when you said a lot of people are not only thankful, but I think have come to just expect food to be well managed and safe because in this country we do an extraordinarily good job of that. But with the pandemic and people's heightened sense of those concerns, it's brought a lot more attention to the practices around health and food safety, especially at all food service operations where people visit.
Awesome. And that brings up a really good point because sometimes I think that people think about, food safety of, hey, let's set some rules or let's set some standards in place and we'll have food safety. But then on the other hand, there's this aspect of having a culture of food safety. From your experience and your vantage point, kind of what have you seen to be the difference between, having food safety standards and then having a culture of food safety?
Well, that's a great question, Terrell. We've seen that fundamentally the standards for food safety are the building blocks that you need to build a culture. I'd say that standards typically set policies that define tasks that have to be performed, and the operating teams and the staff in the food service operation goes about doing those tasks as part of a broader set of things that they have to do to run the establishment effectively. But I think a culture of food safety takes it to the next level, where there's a much deeper understanding of why food safety matters, what can happen if food safety is not particularly well managed. And then, of course, this builds an understanding and an accountability that embeds these values in all of the operating processes in the restaurant. And I think that's when we see organizations have moved from really a set of standards to a culture that effectively works for their organization.
Awesome. Now speaking on the aspect of like the food standards, the food safety standards, with the rules that come out with the FDA, and from your perspective, have you seen, a lot of companies taking the rules that come out from the FDA and just implementing the standard, or have you seen more businesses starting to move towards more of a culture of safety, going, like I said, really understanding the why behind the actual standards that are being communicated?
Well, Terrell, you're exactly right. We have seen a mix across the industry, and we certainly find that I would say historically we're seeing a change over time, where I think everybody understands the importance of food safety more today than they did, say, 10 or 15 years ago. So in that sense, I think there's been a shift. But one of the things that we see among a lot of organizations is that how much an organization matures in its food safety management and how it has created a cultural embrace is very varied between organizations. And sometimes a new business that is growing and relatively small is very focused on just getting customers served. And they don't have a particular sophistication or appreciation for the nuance and some of the things that more mature organizations have. And one of the things that the FDA has done, we saw a study that was released in 2018 where there was a correlation between how much knowledge the organization had, especially the managers, about certain aspects of their business relative to food safety. And there was a very strong correlation that the more they knew, the more they understood, they were much, much more likely to perform better on the food safety metrics that and the items that are observed during a typical visit that assesses how they're doing. So, for example, with quick service restaurants without a food safety system, they had almost 4.5 more line items out of compliance. Wow. And when they compared that to a system that was more sophisticated, they had only less than 2 out of compliance items that were cited. And this kind of ratio is very similar if you go throughout the restaurant industry. So the more knowledge and embrace of robust food safety and a food safety management system, we see high correlations with better performance across the entire team at the restaurant.
Awesome. And now, speaking of, just having that, like you say, the right type of, or an effective type of system, that leads me to the point about, when it comes to training your employees and when it comes down to how we actually get that information communicated to the members of a team. And, one of the thoughts that, it leads me to ask is there a such thing as too much food safety training when it comes down to really communicating that and getting your team on board?
Well, I would say, perhaps selfishly, that I don't think there's too much training. I think there's definitely too little training that we see often. And sometimes I think that just piling on the same, say, an audit as a device to inspire people is not always necessarily the most effective. Fundamentally, we see most training, all food handlers have to go through a basic food safety training. And a lot of times there's some training at the initial onboarding with new employees. But a lot of times we see that that's where it ends for so many organizations, and they think that they've checked that box and training is complete. I think there's two things that really make training much more effective in an ongoing manner for a lot of the successful organizations that we work with. And those two things are this. One is that there is a much more attentive explanation of why food safety practices are designed or defined the way that they are. When we connect the why to the what, we find that the light bulb goes on for a lot of people, and they do appreciate very much why we have to do things the way that they need to get done. A lot of times when we engage with clients, for example, during a visit, we not only are looking for what's compliant or not, but we are talking all the time to them about the why and sharing sometimes anecdotes that get their attention of a situation where someone may have gotten sick from ice that was contaminated. And when we can explain that the practice of not handling the ice correctly can lead to somebody actually getting sick to the point where they get hospitalized, I think that sticks with people in a way that is very productive. So explaining the why is the first part of really successful training. The second, of course, is to do it more than one time. And so as with all training, if it's done in small doses in a very frequent manner, I think it helps keep it top of mind. It reminds people that this is really an important priority, and it builds it into a habit versus something that they may have trained on some time ago and forgotten about.
Awesome. Now, speaking of that, when you talk about, the clients that you guys have, can you help us understand a little bit about, Steritech and the products, the services, and the ways that you help your clients really make progress in this area?
Well, you bet. Steritech is an organization that's got over 30 years of experience. We were one of the first companies to ever offer a third-party food safety evaluation. And we started in the business doing food safety audits. We have evolved over time to really move away from audit as the term. We call them assessments. And we think that it's a much more productive visit to not only look at what is being done properly, but to do the kinds of training we were just talking about. And over time, because we've built a lot of trust and credibility with those clients, these multi-location, quick serve and restaurant and grocery and convenience stores chains, they represent the clients we're in. Many of them have asked us to expand that program to talk about operational standards and help them make sure that they deliver a really consistent brand experience every time. So beyond just the food safety standards, we help them with managing their brand standards. And I think this helps them drive growth, mitigate risk, and promote customer loyalty, which of course helps businesses be a lot more successful.
Awesome. Now, would that program be the Optix 360 program that you guys have?
Yeah, so Optix 360 is just a clever name that we've come up with to talk about the way that we approach working with our clients. So one of the first things we do, Terrell, is we call these the 5 I's. So the first I is we get immersed, and we do spend quite a lot of time trying to learn about the brand and the standards and the culture of their business, so that as we help them define their standards and then train our people in order to evaluate how they're doing, we really understand what drives them and what their brand is all about. The second I we call interact, and this talks about not just coming in and doing a quiet, mysterious, sort of intimidating audit in the background, but to engage with the staff and talk to them and help them understand, and certainly give them a lot of kudos for things they're doing well, but also to explain to them things that are maybe not up to standard and why they need to be handled a little bit differently. So that interaction is the second part of our 5-step process. The third is to inform, and I think that providing good information, good data, and good insights, along with some of that storytelling that I talked about earlier, I think that really helps build the understanding of our clients. And that's so critical for them to understand why it matters and how they should take accountability for the standards and the food safety practices that they have. The fourth I is improve. We think that beyond just doing an audit that delivers a report that says these are the things that you're not doing well, we think that our accountability to our clients is to help them get better. And so I try to hold my team very accountable as we engage with our clients to actually improving the results, their performance, and the metrics that we are seeing across their system. And after all, I think that proves the return on investment that they make in partnering with Steritech to help them get better. And then finally, of course, we think that transforming from a program of just standards to a cultural embrace that helps these businesses be successful, we call that igniting the performance of the business, and doing that by igniting the understanding and the accountability of the organization to do things not just according to standard, but to do them extraordinarily well so that their businesses are successful with their customers.
Also, I mean, with such, a great approach to it, I mean, there's no surprise why you guys won a Excellence in Food Safety Award. So can you tell us a little bit about that award and what was it like being recognized at that level?
Well, Terrell, I'll tell you what, we've won a handful of awards for our business, but the Excellence in Food Safety Award is an award that actually we have now put in place for the industry to recognize those brands that are out there that are doing things the way that we believe at Steritech they should be done. And because we've been working with clients for so long and we've seen so many different kinds of organizations and the way that they approach food safety, we have definitely been able to identify those who are doing it really well and those who need to improve. And so what we've done with this award, which we put in place a couple of years ago, was to, we partner with Fast Casual, which is an industry organization, to identify those concepts in the fast casual space that are doing what we call the 7 pillars of food safety extraordinarily well. And those pillars are senior leader, commitment, and engagement. We think that's the number one cornerstone pillar that makes every program with food safety successful. If the senior leaders are bought in and they walk the talk, we see that organizations respond. The second pillar is food safety communication. So we look at the levels of communication that are happening throughout an organization, how frequently, how they embed food safety as part of their ongoing communications. And we rate those because they're so important. And the level of communication is a good differentiator between those successful organizations and those that maybe are struggling. The third pillar is define standards and procedures. We've been talking a lot about food safety standards, and we like to see documented, defined procedures that lead to the fourth pillar, which is training. And so we look at the training program I alluded to a moment ago, that all training starts with basic food safety at the front end, but the organizations that really separate themselves are the ones that have much more robust ongoing training that explains the why. The fifth pillar is what we call the KPIs, or the key performance indicators and scorecards. And, it's one thing, Terrell, when you have a scorecard that tracks and measures what's going on. And we see a lot of businesses that have scorecards that are associated with their businesses. One of the things that's very interesting that we've seen is that some of these scorecards are so large and overwhelming that they lose focus. And so we have identified best practices in how scorecards should be used, and the way that the assessment scores that we provide should be incorporated to their best effect. And then finally, we have two other things that I think are really important. One is an oversight program. Of course, Steritech is a partner that does an oversight program, but we see very successful internal programs with smaller concepts that pay attention to how well food safety is being done. And if you have an oversight program, we think that's a key part. It's one of our pillars for success. And the last pillar we call positive recognition. And one of the things, Terrell, that is really very obvious to us is that in most cases, a food safety audit is very focused on the penalizing aspects focused on things that aren't being done right. And this creates a very adversarial, intimidated culture in the organization. And so they develop bad habits. And the only time that food safety is ever mentioned is when things are going bad. We see that a positive recognition program is a much more productive way to reward your best performers and to send a message through the organization that our culture values food safety as something that we embrace doing well, and it's a key to our success. So those are the 7 pillars that we have defined, and our award, the annual award that we give out, we survey those organizations that nominate by doing an evaluation of how they're doing against those 7 pillars, and we ultimately pick a winner. This past year, brands Muya Burgers and Fries, Chipotle, and Panda Express were finalists in our award, and all of them demonstrated very impressive practices and commitment to a strong food safety culture. And I'm just delighted to say that Panda Express took top honors this past year. So those are 3 organizations doing a really good job. And we're very proud that they've embraced the importance of and the cultural aspects of building food safety into their day in and day out operations.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. So now that people are excited about, the amazing things and the amazing resource that Steritech offers, where can they find you guys online, or where should they look if they want to get in touch with you?
Well, I would encourage them to go to steritech.com, and we also have a Facebook page and a Twitter handle, and they can reach us by looking up at Steritech as well. So I think that those are great assets and resources for them to get in touch with us, and we'd be delighted to talk to them.
Awesome. Awesome. I love it. Love it. Well, one of the questions that I like to ask every guest that comes on is, when you think about your experience or where you've been, and you think about kind of where you are and the lessons that you've learned, what are 2 pieces of advice that you would share with other business owners in the restaurant industry?
That is a great question, Terrell. I would tell you that the first piece of advice I think I would tell them is that they should understand that food safety is bigger than just operating tasks. I would advise them to take food safety as something that they want to build into their culture right from the get-go. It's not something that you want to try to make stronger later when that becomes important. It's important from day one. And to help them do that, I think one of the things I would ask them to do whenever they engage with their team, whether it's at a single location or if they have 10 or even 50 locations, I think making food safety part of their everyday management discussion is really an important thing that they should do. Maybe they could adopt a practice that we see that I think helps reinforce this. Make the first question they ask every one of their employees, what are you doing to ensure great food safety at our restaurant? And I think that will send a very clear message that that's really important as part of their cultural values. So that's the first advice I'd give them. I think the second piece of advice I might give them is to have them look at our 7 pillars assessment. The 7 pillars that I just went through are a foundational aspect of good food safety. And we offer a no-cost self-evaluation so they can actually rate themselves based on how they're doing in each of those areas relative to practices that they've got. And I think that would be very illuminating to them about what they're doing well and opportunities that they have to improve. And this gives them a sense of what are other organizations doing to ensure that food safety is embedded as an intrinsic part of their culture. So those are the 2 things, Terrell, I'd have them do. If there was a third thing, I'd say call immediately and ask for a partnership with Steritech. I think we could help them.
I love it. I love it. Well, Doug, thank you so much for coming on. It's definitely been a pleasure. Like as we a lot of times when people think about a restaurant, they're not always thinking about the food safety, the systems, the culture of it, but they definitely hope and pray that they exist in that restaurant. So definitely thank you for shining a lot more light, and thank you for all the awesome work that you guys do with all of your clients. And before we wrap up again, can you repeat the website one more time so people can go check you guys out, see what you have going on, and actually check out that assessment?
You betcha. So Steritech.com. Can't get easier than that. I think they can find good information there that'll be really insightful and valuable to them. And if they're interested in reaching out for more contact, they can get in touch with us through that as well. So thanks for having me, Terrell. It's been great talking about it. Always love talking about food safety and the work that Steritech can do to help people make sure that they're running their businesses as successfully as they can and as safely as they can, and keep it on the growth path.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode. If you like what you heard, don't be selfish. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and then share this with a friend, because you know a business owner that could definitely use this insight. So be sure to hit that subscribe button, share it with a friend, and turn on the notification bell so you get all the updates when we release a new episode.